To make an entrance is the way an entertainer survives. To get out alive is another thing entirely. This is a way to survive. Welcome to the Ear-Wicker podcast. Follow along with our host, Vince Corkery, as he discusses a broad range of musical topics, with interviews of top players, club owners, producers, and engineers that make it all happen. Your virtual backstage pass. Remember to like and subscribe to this podcast, and of course, it's free. Wait and go, Lord, Lord, have my time on my wicked soul.
Hello and welcome to the Ear-Wicker podcast. And today we have a very special guest. He's a blues musician, singer, record producer, a record label owner at one time, right?
At one time.
Yeah. Leroy Pierson.
And DJ.
And DJ.
Notorious DJ.
Of course, DJ, yeah. Well, thank you for being here, Leroy.
No problem,
really appreciate,
Vince.
Honored that you're here. Really.
Appreciate you asking me.
Oh, great. Well, are you from St. Louis? Is that?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
North County boy.
All right, right on. And when did you first hear the blues?
First heard the blues. I guess about 1959. My mother was what I guess you'd call a shopaholic, and she would take me down to Famous and Bar department store downtown. And in those days, it was quite elegant. They would have these rooms and serve champagne to the women, and they had that people would model the clothes. So it was the last place in the world a young boy wanted to be. So she would let me roam the streets, and back then, there was no problem roaming the streets of St. Louis. And on that corner, just I'm bad with my directions, but just west of the building, there was this area where people would perform on the street. And the first guy that I ever remember seeing playing the blues was J.D. Short, who was a cousin to Big Joe Williams, and a pretty notorious figure in St. Louis blues back in the late 20s, early 30s. So he was fascinating to watch, although I didn't really learn anything by watching him. I didn't have a guitar, I wasn't playing, but he was a flat picker, which was kind of odd for a blues guy. Most of them are finger pickers. But he was a fierce singer, and they used to call him Jelly Jaw, because when he sang, there was something weird about the way his jaw would look. It looked like it was jelly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Like a fat woman trying to do shimmy,
Wow.
But I was kind of taken by this guy, and I had no idea what he was playing or what you would even call that. But there was a bookstore right across the street, and I had sort of carte blanche as a kid. My mother would not let me buy sweets, but I could buy a book. She would always buy me a book. So I had read my first book on jazz, which was called, I think it was called New York Jazz, and it was by a fellow named Sam Charters, who was an Englishman who had come to America. And I liked this book. So I noticed in the bookstore that he had a second book that had just come out. It was called The Country Blues. So I bought that, and that's where I first read about Robert Johnson and Lonnie Johnson, some of those people. But the book itself, in retrospect, was a very thin veneer of what the real country blues were about, because he didn't even mention Charlie Patton, Skip James, Son House, any of those Titanous figures.
What year was this, you think?
1959.
59, okay.
And so at that point, I started asking, there was a fellow that worked in the basement of Baton Music downtown who ordered the records for the store. He was into old jazz 78s, and I loved talking to this guy. And so I told him I was reading this book, and would he order in some records? So there was a record that came with the book. It didn't come with the book, but you could purchase it separate from the book, called The Country Blues. So that was the first thing that I remember specifically as being blues. But I had a habit from very early on, and I couldn't even tell you how early, but I'm going to say maybe from 7 years old, 7 or 8. I loved to listen to my little radio. When they'd send me to bed, I would put the radio on my pillow and lean on it and listen to music. And my favorite was this guy, Gabriel, whose name was Mitchell Hearns. And Gabriel did the late night shift at KATZ. And he would, I loved him because he would come on and he would say something like, they've been spinning just new James Brown record all day. I'm going to give you people a break. I'm not going to play James Brown for at least 2 hours, but I am going to play Lightning Hopkins.
Whoa.
And he was playing occasionally. He'd play Lightning, or he'd play Brownie McGee or Albert King. He loved Albert King. So I would sort of pick up ideas as to what was out there. But in those days, you could have held all the blues albums that were available worldwide in one hand. There just weren't too many records out there. There was only one Muddy Waters album at the time.
Wow.
The Howlin' Wolf album hadn't even come out. It was early, you know.
Whoa. Yeah, I'm surprised at that, yeah.
Yeah, so but after a while, once I got a little older and I got a driver's license, I would go down to Joe's Music and Shop. They had a small selection. And then I started doing work in the summer. I would work at Mallinckrodt Chemical in the summertime to save up my money. And I got in the habit of going to New York to buy blues records because you just couldn't find them in St. Louis.
Whoa.
So I would take the Greyhound bus up to New York, spend my money. I'd spend all my money on these records.
Wow.
Come home flat broke.
Yeah. Whoa. Well, that's dedication.
Yeah, and I do remember seeing a show in 1964. There was a show that had played in Mexico City for some function, and the U.S. government had sponsored this program. And they, on their way back, they had stopped in St. Louis. They did a concert at the old Kiel Opera House, which I think is the Stiefel or Stifle today. And Booker White was on the show. And Doc Watson was on the show with Merle. And they played some blues too. Oh. That was quite an eye opener for me.
Wow.
Then in '65, I went to New York for the first and last annual New York Folk Festival, which was an incredible event that was held at Carnegie Hall. And the thing that was wonderful about this event was they had packaged shows into different themes. So there was a show called The Evolution of Funk. And it was just blues and black music primarily.
Yeah.
And so I got a chance to see that on Friday and on Sunday. And it was just the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I got to see John Hurt do 2 90-minute sets. Got to see Son House twice, Mance Lipscomb, Muddy Waters, Otis Spann, Dave Van Ronk, Chuck Berry.
Whoa. Were you playing guitar at this time?
At that time, I had a guitar, but I wouldn't exactly say I was playing it.
Okay.
I had a bunch of friends. We were trying to learn how to play it. And I had, like a sheet with basic chords on it. And that's about where I was at with the guitar.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Never really thought that. In those days, it just never occurred to me that I would be playing the guitar.
Oh.
Oh.
Well, when did you start?
Playing?
Yeah.
I think I got the first guitar when I was about 14. It was a nice guitar, though. It really had a nice sound to it. And, I was flat picking at the time. I didn't really understand too much about finger picking and all that. Because I at these shows, you'd be 20 rows back. You couldn't exactly see what somebody was doing with their hands on the stage very easily. Once I'd made some connections and I was getting close up to these guys, then I changed everything. And I remember I spent the better part of 1966 just trying to play one song all the way through with an alternating thumb pick. Like a John Hurt style of thumb pick. And it was amazing because I worked. I thought, I'll never be able to do this. And then, boom, all of a sudden it happened one night. And from that point on, it was easy.
Whoa.
I don't know what turned in my brain, but something turned in my brain. And all of a sudden I could at least begin to play the sound I wanted to play.
Yes, yeah. Wow.
And we all have sounds in our head that we aspire to get to those sounds.
Wow. So, when was your your first band, or were you ever in a band?
Well, I was in a garage band in high school, but we didn't play out or anything. We just irritated the neighborhood. Then I started playing in St. Louis in '71 as a soloist. And I had this friend that I had literally grown up with in the same crib, who was a very fine jazz drummer. By the time he was 18, he was playing professionally with good jazz musicians.
Oh, wow.
So he started playing with me. And I guess when you're playing with somebody that you grew up with in the crib, you just don't need to talk about it. He knew exactly what I was going to do before I did it. The thing I loved the most about him, sometimes people don't understand this, but he would kick my ass while I was playing. He would drive the beat. So
push
the beat,
you.
the beat always had this thing going on. I loved playing with him. And then I guess I started a band, and when was that? I guess around 1977, started rehearsing up a band. Played with the band for about 10 years. Sometimes it was a 5-piece band, sometimes it was a trio, sometimes it was a quartet. You know how that is.
Yes,
You can't keep a band together all the time. So
Now, did you do any recordings with this band?
yeah, I did an album on the Nighthawk label, which was a label that I owned back then.
Yes.
With the band. And then subsequently, I did some recordings over at Webster with a fellow named Bill Porter, who used to be Elvis's sound man.
Yes.
And that eventually came out, but it took a long time because at the end of those recordings, the band kind of broke up, and I was content with that because I was starting to get a bad case of tinnitus, and I didn't always want to be hearing a G sharp in my ear all the time. So let that go for some time. But I loved playing with the band. There's nothing quite like it. For one thing, I, like a lot of musicians, especially soloists, I had bad nerves. I had stage fright. I would worry about the stage, but not with the band. With the band, it was just like go in there and it just would go on its own.
Yeah.
All I had to do was turn the key, and that thing would purr.
Yeah. When you're soloing, it's all you. But when you have a little support,
A lot of pressure when you're soloing.
Yeah. So that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
You did plenty of those, though. Plenty of gigs solo.
Well, I learned to keep my eyes shut. That was the key for me. Because if you start looking at the crowd, it's hard to keep your mind on what the next lyric is or this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
And if you look out there and some girl might wink at you or something, well, that whole song might fall apart.
Yeah.
So I learned just to keep my eyes shut. And
You also, you were in college, you were producing concerts or festival?
I did 2 shows. I produced a couple of small shows, and then I did some bigger shows. I did a weekend festival. Well, I wouldn't call it a festival. It was Fred McDowell, Son House, Arthur Big Boy Crudup, and Junior Wells. And then that did very well. And I somehow was able to convince the powers that be at the college that if they let me put on a festival, as opposed to just booking another rock and roll band, because they would do that once a semester, that I would get them coverage in Newsweek, Billboard, and the Chicago Tribune. Everything that I thought I could do, I would say, yes, I can do this. And so that ended up working out really well. And so what actually happened was I used to jam with this mandolin player. He was the first mandolin player before I knew Curtis Buchanan. That really impressed me. He was a very good player. And he was on this board of students and faculty that would decide what the entertainment was going to be for the next semester. So he came over. We were picking in the dormitory, and he said, "Oh, we decided on the band. We're going to book it tomorrow." I said, "What's that?" He says, "The Mothers of Invention." And I said, "Well, Al, how much you going to pay the Mothers of Invention?" He says, 7 G's, $7,000. I said, "Well, hell, I could put on a festival for that kind of money." Because, I used to overpay these guys, tell you the truth, but you could get almost anybody in the blues world to come hundreds of miles for $300. They'd be there. So I booked a show with about 16 acts on it and did the whole weekend, and we had workshops, and we showed some films in the student union and had a big blues caravan.
Wow.
And I could tell you who was on it if you want to hear it, but it's a long list. It's quite a list.
Would you say everybody who was anybody at the time?
Well, I'll just start, and you stop me when you want me to stop. We had, of the old guys that were recording in the Depression, we had Robert Wilkins, Roosevelt Sykes, Son House, Furry Lewis, and a few I'm not thinking of. Then of the later guys, we had Fred McDowell, Mance Lipscomb, Robert Pete Williams, Johnny Shines, Eddie Taylor, J.B. Hutto, Johnny Young, another great mandolin player, Johnny Young.
Oh, wow.
I always dug the mandolin, but I never owned one, so people didn't have to suffer trying to hear me play it.
Oh. Now, I did read that Son House brought you up and you played with him during one of these.
I wouldn't say I played with him. What had happened was I wanted to get to know Son House, and so I had been told that if you wanted to talk to Son, you needed to be at his room about 7 in the morning because he was a morning guy, and that he liked to sit in his room for about an hour after he woke up and sing gospel tunes to himself. So I went over, and I spent the morning with Son House, and he sang some beautiful a cappella stuff for me. And then there was a knock at the door, and it was Arthur Crudup and Fred McDowell. And they came in, and they all started singing these gospel tunes together. And, it's 3 really good voices, so it was quite a treat for me.
Yeah.
And so I was singing with them because I grew up in the Baptist church, so I know those songs. And so I said to him, you guys are all booked to play an hour apiece. How about if you just go up and play like 40 minutes apiece, and at the end, we'll have you guys all come out and do this gospel stuff together because people would love to hear this. And so they agreed to that. And that night I was standing on the edge of the stage, backstage, watching, and they started doing this song called Back Training, Get Your Load, about the train to Zion. And we had done that earlier in the day, and Son House reached over and pulled me out on the stage. So I had to sing the song with them. And, mostly I was muttering because I didn't really know all the lyrics of this thing. I'd heard it a million times, but I'd never sung it before, really, outside of that morning. So
That's amazing, man.
yeah, it was quite a thrill and pretty scary, too.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible.
Well, it's lovely to be able to tell people in your old age that the first time you were on stage really was with Son House. Nobody believes it. But no, seriously, almost nobody ever believes that story.
Oh. That's a good one, man.
Yeah.
Now, when did you start your label for Nighthawk? Was that in the 70s?
Well, I have to get it together in my mind. I'm not too good on times, but when I had lived in New York for a while in Greenwich Village, and there was this fella in the village back then named Nick Pearls. He was one of the three guys who had rediscovered Son House, and he had what was arguably the best collection of blues 78s from the Depression era in the world. And he had started a label called, it was originally called Belzona Records. He had to change the name after 5 albums to Yazoo Records. And so I had received a thing in the mail that had gone to my mother's address, and she had sent it on to New York for me, announcing that he was putting out this new label with all these old great blues things. And there was an address in the East Village. So I thought, well, I'll walk over there and just see what this is. I didn't know it was a store or what it was, and it turned out it was just Nick's apartment. And I knocked on the door, and he buzzed me up without asking who I was. And I went up, and he said, "Oh, I thought you were the painter."
Oh.
And I said, "No, I want to get some of these new albums you're putting out, and I'd love to see your collection." And he says, "You want to see how I do an album?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Come in and sit down." So we went in and sat down on his floor. He had a turntable on the floor. I guess I shouldn't really describe this because technically it's Nick's secrets, but he had this methodology of getting the best sound that you can possibly imagine out of these old records. It was quite an education. So I didn't have any paper, but I was taking notes in my brain. And so when I started, I had been collecting when I was in my mid-teens. I was knocking on doors and asking if people had old records. So I already had a selection of some old blues records. And I was getting very good at finding the stuff. And part of it was Gabriel. He helped me find a lot of records in East St. Louis. And so I ended up with quite a collection of primarily post-war blues records and also a lot of late 30s stuff. And I just thought, well, maybe I'll put out a record and see what this is about and see how it goes. So I put out a couple of records, and they sold pretty well, so I just kept putting out reissue records. I put out about 10 albums, regional anthologies. And I think the difference between my anthologies and other ones of the era were that I actually made an effort to pay everybody. And I would get permission before I put the stuff out, which meant that I could also get interviews. So now that made it possible for me to write some pretty good liner notes, because I didn't really have to write that much. I could just quote, what I was told. And so that's how that started.
Oh, okay.
Then years later, my interests were widening. I was getting into Cajun music a lot and into Jamaican music.
Yes.
So we did make a switch, and
Yeah. I mean, you were, I guess, listening and promoting reggae before anybody, right? I mean, even before the English hit in the 80s. And
well, I wouldn't say before anybody. There was a guy in St. Louis named Joe Condolari. He died about a year back. Joe wasn't a student at Washington U, but he did have a radio show at Washington U. Now, if you were more than 3 blocks from the campus, you couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
But he was playing reggae before I was on the radio.
Oh.
And then I had a radio show on KWMU, which was an NPR station. And my original show was called The Missouri Tradition, and it was just about Missouri music.
Oh, okay.
But I kept cheating a little. About once a month, I would do a show that was all Cajun music. And then I would play up the fact that we did have Cajuns living in Old Mines, Missouri, and some other communities. Try to make something, try to make it connect.
Yeah.
Because it was, I was being paid with a grant. And so it had to have a Missouri theme to it. But I was doing okay up there, and at one point, the head of the station asked me if I would do a blues show. And I said, well, I will do a blues show, but only if you let me do a reggae show too. So he gave me 2 hours. First hour would be blues, second hour would be reggae. And that worked out just fine.
Yeah. And that, what was it, Babylon?
Beat Down Babylon.
Yeah.
Or Babylon.
Babylon, yeah, man.
Yeah.
Wow. And you started touring the world too, right? With the U.S. Information Agency, or
a little bit. I wouldn't say the world, but I did a couple of tours. The one for the United States Information Agency was Africa and the Middle East. Then I had done one a couple of years earlier for the National Council of the Traditional Arts in Jamaica. We had 4 acts that went down there, and we went down specifically for an event that was an international music festival. And they had people from everywhere in the world at this festival. And then we did 56 shows. We were there for a month.
Now you say we, is that your band?
My band. Well, it was a trio at that time. Okay. The trio was in Jamaica.
Oh, okay. Who was in that trio, do you
had a bass player named Ace, and a great drummer and fiddle player, Jeff Seitz.
Oh, Jeff, sure, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff was amazing, really. To this day, he amazes me because the tour we did in the Middle East and Africa was really stressful and not a lot of sleep, and played a lot of shows, did a lot of radio and all this stuff. I mean, and when you're doing something like that, you will make a mistake here and there. And if you don't make the mistake, the luggage handlers will make a mistake. Something's going to go wrong almost every time. You have to be ready for it.
Yeah.
But I tell people, and it's the absolute truth, that I made mistakes. The bass player made mistakes. Everybody, but not Jeff. This guy, he wouldn't go anywhere without his drumsticks. The guy was playing drums in the taxi cab. The guy was playing drums in the market. He never stopped playing. So he never made a mistake on the stage, not ever. And that's the guy the guy that you really want in the group. I mean, right. I have so much respect for Jeff. He's a fiddle maker as well, and has a shop on Loughborough. I suggest any fiddle player to patronize him.
Yes, yeah, he's great. Was Rusty Nail your first recording with that band?
With the band, yeah. I had done some other little recording. I had produced an album by Henry Townsend. And I asked Henry who he would like to have on the album, if there was anybody he would like to bring in as another voice on the album. And he said he wanted Yank Rachel, the great mandolin player and guitar player. So we brought in Yank, and the first day that we were in the studio with Yank, Henry was supposed to arrive at noon, and he called about 12:30 and said, I had a traffic accident. I'm going to be messed up for several hours here straightening this out. And so I said, well, Yank, you want to sit around and just shoot the breeze, or you want to cut some tunes? He says, let's cut some tunes. So I did some recording with Yank Rachel, but I don't think any of it will ever see the light of day. Although I'm really glad I did it. It was a lot of fun. Nice to have something like that.
Yeah.
But it was pretty informal.
Yeah.
So that was actually the first recordings that I did in the studio was with Yank.
Oh, wow.
And I did compose a song that day off the top of my head because Yank had played with Sleepy John Estes and Hammy Nixon. All of them were from Tennessee. And they had recorded a song in 1935 called You Shouldn't Say That. And it was Sleepy John Estes would say these awful things, and then the chorus would say, you shouldn't say that, you oughtn't to say that. So I stole that idea, and I said, Yank, you want to play You Shouldn't Say That? He says, you know the lyrics? I said, I'll make them up. So I made up this song about how I was going to stab my gal with a great long rusty nail. And that's where that song came from. We just made it up, you know.
That's fantastic.
Ended up being the title of the album. And for a longest time, it was probably the one song that I would get requests for. Until, you'll like this story, so I'll tell it.
Yeah.
Until I had this friend from high school that owned a biker's bar out in the country. And he invited me to come out and play one night. And we'd played out there several times, and we always had a good crowd. But this particular night, we set up, and there was not a soul in the place. And after a while, it got time we were supposed to play, and there's still not a soul in the place. And I noticed that there was no bartender in the room. So I went around the kitchen, and there was no one in the kitchen. Well, they lived upstairs, so I walked up the staircase, made some noise so that no one was coming up, and I heard they were watching the television. And I said, there's nobody down there. Do you want me to start playing? And he said, we're not going to have a crowd tonight. Look at the TV. And it was what they call the slow chase with that football player.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
O.J. Simpson.
O.J. Simpson, exactly. And so nobody came in that night because everybody was wanting to see whether he was going to commit suicide on the freeway. So the next week, I was playing back down at the Oyster Bar, and I started playing that song, and I got booed. The women that were in the room started booing me. And it didn't occur to me. The song is about stabbing some woman. And, of course, it's tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
But they didn't take it that way. So that was the last night I ever performed that song.
Holy
I figured, well, hey, listen, if they don't like it, I got other songs I can sing, you know.
That's insane.
I like the song myself.
Well, maybe you can bring it back.
Yeah.
I know you were involved. You wrote a book, Old Fire Sticks. Is that? Are you a co-writer or something?
Well, Old Fire Sticks is a story. I had a very close relationship with Bunny Wailer, one of the original Wailers, and he wanted Roger Steffens and I to write a book with him called Old Fire Sticks, which would be the true story of the Wailers, not this Hollywood bull that you see.
Yeah.
And so when we started it, the first day I said, Bunny, I have another book in mind. I would like to do the first thorough reggae discography of the Wailers. Everything you guys ever recorded, all the details, where, when, who was on the cut, who took the solo, the whole 9 yards. And so I don't be surprised when I start asking technical, specific questions about certain songs, because we'll kill two birds with one stone here. But when we were done with the interviews, we did about 60 hours worth of interviews with Bunny. And there was some really wild stuff in there, I want to tell you. And we were very much looking forward to working on this book, and we started working on it. But then Bunny got in touch with us, and he informed us that there had been a meeting between Chris Blackwell, Rita Marley, Bunny, and a couple of other Wailers Associated people to try to, I guess the words would be, cut up the pie, try to decide who was going to get what. And the money involved was huge money, just huge money. So Rita, boy, I want to be careful because Rita's somebody you don't want to cross.
Rita is
Bob Marley's wife.
Okay.
Rita Marley. She asked Bunny about the book. She said, I hear that you are doing a book. And he said, well, it isn't out yet, but yeah, we're working on it. And she says, and does it have this in there? And does it have this in there? And does it have this in there? And he's going, it has everything. And she made him an offer to kill the book. And the offer was excessive. It's more money than any Jamaican outside of Bob Marley had ever seen. It was a lot of money. So he agreed to kill the book. Bunny is no longer with us.
Yeah.
So I suppose there's some remote possibility that I might, if I get the right hair under my I might go ahead and write some of it, or at least write a few articles.
Oh, you should.
Well, over the years I've had different attitudes about it because I believe in the truth. I want people to know the truth. At the same time, everybody has their right to privacy. And there are things about Bob that I don't think he would particularly appreciate the public being aware of, and I have no desire to step on those toes, even if they aren't present in the here and now. But some of the stories are really good and should be out there, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Rita has suffered a stroke recently, and she's now, she's left her plantation. She had something like 4,000 acres in Africa.
Whoa.
As she was living the high life over there. She's living with Ziggy in L.A. now.
Oh.
He's taking care of her.
Oh, okay.
He's a good kid, so he's doing the right thing.
Oh, that's great, yeah. Well, speaking of book, is there a book about your life in the future? Do you have any aspirations?
I don't know. People talk to me about it, but in the meantime, we did do the discography. We finished that.
Oh.
And that's out there. And my whole idea of doing that was just to start a ball rolling, because Jamaican recording business is vast and detailed. And once you think you know what it is, you don't know half of it. You might not even know a quarter of it. It's so deep. In Jamaica, they have a saying, music like dirt. And that just means music is as common as dirt.
Yeah.
There's a good singer down the street. There's a better singer down the street. They all record. I used to tell people that you want to meet Jamaican people that record in reggae, just hail a cab in Kingston. Because half the time it's going to be somebody that when they tell you their name, you're going to go, oh, I have your records. Yeah, really.
Wow.
Kingston was one of those places that it occurs every now and then. You get a pocket of a geographical pocket where the DNA mixes together just right. And you'll find that in that city, like it was New Orleans for about 20 years, then some other city. And normally it'll be where the roughest times are, the hardest times. That'll be where you'll get these musical explosions coming out of cities. So to just give you an example, 2nd Street in Trenchtown, where Bob and the Wailers are from, is only about 2 blocks long. It's not any length of street. But Bunny Wailer, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Delroy Wilson, Joe Higgs, the Wailing Souls, they all came off those 2 blocks. So it was like this incredible accident of DNA and time and space that happened.
That's amazing, man.
And now if you go down to that area, there's not much going on because that DNA is gone.
Well, Leroy, we're so happy that you made it today. Hopefully, you could have something written about your life. That would be nice. We have so much information. I mean, you're the guy that shook the hands of Robert Johnson. So.
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. So.
My biggest thrill though wasn't musical. When you're growing up, you have people in your life, and people that you know about that you put on a pedestal that you just idolize. To me, it was Muhammad Ali. And in about 1986, I was in Jamaica, and there was an annual presentation of this award, and I can't recall the name of the award, but every year it would go back and forth. One year it would be a Jamaican, then it would be someone from outside of Jamaica, then it would be Jamaican again the next year and go back and forth. But it was people that had contributed to culture, and it didn't have to be specifically Jamaican culture. So this particular year, and I was unaware of this, but at the hotel that I was staying at, they were going to have this event, and the recipient was going to be Don King. Hardly somebody that I would,
Yeah.
But, and they were going to have certain speakers were going to get up and talk about Don King. And so I would get up every morning at 7 o'clock. You have to get up early in Jamaica. Everybody gets up early. And I walked out past the swimming pool, and my friend Flames was waiting on me. And this guy I would go out and look for records with him. And I saw from across the way that there was this tall man with his back to me, who was flaying about with his arms, talking to Flames. So I got about halfway across. I was still quite a distance from him, but the movement, it was his back, but I knew it was Muhammad Ali. So finally I got to meet Muhammad Ali. That was my biggest thrill. I met Bob Marley, I met Peter Tosh, and wow. Those were great thrills too.
Yeah.
But Muhammad Ali, oh my God.
That's amazing. Hey, man.
Yeah, I told him, I said, I couldn't possibly tell you how much you affected me. I was a conscientious objector, and he's the one that gave me the strength to think maybe I could do that.
Yeah. Wow.
So I told him he meant a whole lot to me, but I'm sure everybody tells Muhammad Ali that he's meant a lot to them.
Yeah.
But
you got to do it. You got to actually do that.
Yeah, it was a great thrill.
Wow. Well, are you playing anywhere now? Are you doing? No.
I haven't been playing for some time. I had a gig that was lined up that was going to be 7 nights in southern France. And I was very, very excited about going to France again. So I started working really hard. It's like every day I'd play for 4 or 5 hours every day. I was starting to get to where I was going, yeah, I can do this. And then COVID hit. And, I'm 76 years old. People that go into a club, number one, nobody that's 76 goes into a club. And people that go into a club...
Might be for lunch.
Yeah. People go to a club and they drink, and they want to see something that reflects them.
Yeah.
And I no longer do that. I'm too old to do that. So, I have to wait for the single shows. I'm not going to play in clubs anymore. Yeah. But I had a long life in clubs, and I played at BB's for 24 years.
Yeah. That's a pretty good run.
Yeah. Yeah, before that I had played 12 years Saturday nights if I was in town at the Oyster Bar. That was my favorite place to play.
Yes.
Outside at the Oyster Bar.
Oh, yeah.
Eric Stein would come and do our sound.
Oh, okay.
And you know, when you're playing in a bar or anywhere, you're only as good as the sound is. So I noticed right away once Eric started doing our sound that we were making more money and getting more offers, and I think it was totally due to his genius as a sound
he's
man.
Incredible. Yeah, we just lost him. I
Yeah.
guess back in the fall. So
Yeah, and that's the last thing that I played was
Yeah.
was a little tribute to him.
yes, yeah. I think I saw you there actually.
Well, I wasn't very good, but
Oh.
but it was heartfelt because I really loved Eric.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Leroy, just want to thank you for coming over and spending time over here at the old Ear-Wicker podcast. Hopefully, for me personally, I hope you can write something down, and there's just so much. I just was covering the surface of your life. You've just done a lot, and people should know it.
I was lucky. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. And I guess there's one other thing I should mention, because I like to put this in just about everything, is we lost one of the really great people in the music business this last year, Dick Waterman, who owned a company called Avalon Productions. And he's one of the three people that rediscovered Sun House. And he was the booking agent for Skip James and John Hurt and Matt Slipscomb and all these guys. So once I got to be friends with Dick and met his lovely secretary, Bonnie Raitt, from that point on, I never had to buy a ticket or do anything. I mean, I was backstage at any blues festival I wanted to go to. And I would help him, and I wasn't working for him, but we were buddies, and he opened all sorts of doors for me.
That's kind of amazing right there.
Yeah, it's too bad that he just passed away. He was somewhat well known in St. Louis, too. He'd been here several times. He was a fine photographer, and before it's out of print, I would recommend, I can't think of the name of it, but he has a photographic book of blues singers.
Oh.
And quite worth the investment. Dick Waterman.
Okay. Maybe Google his name, maybe find a book.
Yeah.
So, wow. Well, thank you.
Thank
again.
you, Vince. I
It's
appreciate
great.
it.
I mean, I'm just kind of floored that you're here, so really appreciate it. And thank you for listening. And please like and subscribe to this Ear-Wicker podcast. All right. We'll see you at the next gig.
Right on.
Remember to like and subscribe to this podcast, and we'll see you backstage.